Thanks, Diana.
Mm-hmm.
Hummingbirds have returned, so it's good to see Margaret loves the hummingbirds. And I have put out my hummingbird feeder, although I have not yet seen one yet this year.
Great, folks. So we're just encouraging folks to put in the chat what their favorite bird is. And you can listen to me because I'm going to start talking. It's 7:05 and we have 31 people tuned in. We actually have 77 folks who registered tonight, which is fabulous. Okay, so we're here for the Zoom presentation with Michele, and it's part of the Waltham Land Trust, our programs. I am Sonia Wadman. I'm the executive director, and I'm just going to say a few words about our group. Our mission is to promote, protect, restore, and acquire open space. We thought long and hard about the order of those verbs. And it is true. Promote is number one. We love, love, love our open spaces. We want people to go outside and enjoy our wilderness, our urban landscapes. And so we just love, love, love our open space. We, of course, we protect it when it's in jeopardy, when it's being harmed, when there's threats to open space. We rally our folks to go to City Hall or reach out to their ward counselors or other folks to protect it. We restore landscapes. This is very exciting. Our volunteer trail stewards, who we probably about 300 of them. We've trained over 350 in the 10 years that we've had our volunteer stewardship program. So our stewards remove litter, but also some of them remove invasive plants. And what we're really excited about is we're, excuse me, finally able to be purchasing seeds and seedlings and shrubs and native plants and plant them where we have removed the invasives. And that's a key factor in actually restoring landscapes. And then lastly, we acquire open space. We're just a small little nonprofit. We don't have a lot of money, but we have been very fortunate to be offered a land, Smith Point, which we secured on Hardy Pond. And just recently, we bought 3 undevelopable parcels right on the shore of Hardy Pond. So now we have what we call the Lakeview Preserve, and we have many fabulous plans for it, starting projects that will help with climate resilience and those types of things. So we're really similar to a friends group. We have events throughout the year. Every month we have at least one walk or an educational talk or both. And we also usually have a fundraiser. And we even do this in winter, December, January, February. We are a membership organization, which means the majority of our funding comes from people who pay annual dues. And we think they're pretty reasonable. It's only $25 for an individual, $50 for a household. And of course, we'd be delighted if someone were to join at a higher level. But if $25 isn't something you can swing, we have another discounted rate of $15. It's you get the same benefits as a regular individual. It's a little bit less. So all of those options are available on our website if you want to become a member. And why you might is because dues help pay for our amazing Zoom presenters and our special walk leaders. They also pay for our tools and trainings for those stewards. We often have campaigns where we need to, excuse me, secure legal help or guidance. And of course, we do lots of printing of our trail guides. We do have QR codes around, but we find that folks still like the paper guides. So we're printing a bunch of those. That costs money. And then it costs to pay me and to rent our office and other things. So the benefits members enjoy our biannual newsletter. We just had our spring edition come out, and we'll send out another one in fall. And this is different than the e-newsletter, e-blasts that you guys get from me. Here we go in depth about our properties or our campaigns. Oftentimes we get into the history of the properties. In fact, Marie Daly, who's a founding member of our board, has been writing articles about the history of the Lakeview Preserve properties. And it's really cool. So you learn a whole lot more as a member. And then also you get discounts on our ticket events. Most of our events are free, but every once in a while we have a big fundraiser. And if you're a member, you get like $5 off on that. So, and that includes our Green Space Blues Jam, which is our big fundraiser happening on June 9th. So if you are a member, you get a discounted price. But of course, the best thing about being a member is knowing that you're part of something bigger and you're doing what you can to help our environment, to help us lead campaigns that are going to save the world or do our very best, and doing what we can to improve Waltham's environment. So please consider becoming a member, but you can also just make a donation on our website, walthamlandtrust.org. We have lots of events, especially in May and June. These are our busiest months. So this Saturday, we have a fundraiser with the Wagon Wheel Farm Stand, which is just over the line in Lexington. This place is awesome. It's a family-run, small-ish farm stand that has a huge variety of seedlings for sale. So I know there's several seedling sales going on this weekend. So add Wagon Wheel to your circuit and stop in and buy seedlings, but they also have great deli sandwiches. It's like a farm stand. So they have fruits and vegetables. And of course, they also have fish and groceries. You can get everything you want there. So you do not need a certificate, but you do need to remember to tell the cashier that you're here buying stuff on behalf of the Waltham Land Trust. You're part of the Waltham Land Trust fundraiser. You love the Waltham Land Trust, and we will get 20% of everyone who tells the cashier that. They'll make a copy of your receipt and they'll put that duplicate copy of the receipt into a little bucket. So if that doesn't happen, you didn't tell them that you're a supporter of the Land Trust. So make sure you do that. We do have little reminder sheets at our website if you need something to print out. Michelle's Bird Walk a week from tonight is full. Space is limited, and wouldn't you know it, filled up within a day of us posting it. So sorry. There will be another one later on in the summer, a morning walk. So just stay tuned and we'll let you know when that happens. And again, space will be limited for that one as well. On June 1st, the first Saturday of every June is always National Trails Day. So we'll be picking up litter along the Charles River Path, where many of you came for the Earth Day cleanup. So that's meeting at Shaw's at 130 River Street, 10 to noon. I'll confess, there's not a lot of litter, and we removed a lot of garlic mustard on Earth Day, but there'll still be something for people to do, and it'll be great for your to see you all come check out the river. But our big thing is the Green Space Blues Jam. So this is a couple of things going on here. The online auction opens on Wednesday, June 5th, and it will end on Monday, June 10th.
Let's go. Come on, Sydney. Hey,
And folks, if you don't mind just muting yourself, I'd appreciate it. So the online auction is going to be those days, and lots of great things you can bid on and win when it closes at 6 p.m. on Monday, June 10th. We already have Red Sox tickets and some artwork and handcrafted bowls, beautiful stuff. So check that out. But the big thing is the gala, the event, which is going to be this year on a Sunday afternoon. This is a big change for us. Sunday, June 9th. And it is going to be where we've had it the past couple of years at 500 Totten Pond Road. And for the price of a ticket, which again, if you're a member and you buy right now, it's $65. It's $70 if you're not a member. The prices will go up after Memorial Day by $10. We also have a under 21 ticket for $25. But there's going to be this awesome musician, Sonia Ray Taylor, who was nominated as Boston's Best Blues Artist last year. And so there's music, there's beer. We have beer from Sam Adams and cider from Stormalong. And of course, there'll be non-alcoholic drinks and wine. So come check it out. It's our major fundraiser. Please get all the details for all of these events on our website, walthamlandtrust.org. So now on to the show. This program is being recorded and it will be put on our YouTube channel. You can just go to our website, walthamlandtrust.org, and at the bottom, click on the icon That's the YouTube one, and that'll take you right to our videos list. Please keep yourself muted to avoid background noise. So everyone, put yourself on mute right now, please and thank you. And later on in the show, if you have questions at the end, put them into the chat. And if we want to have a little back and forth, we can unmute you, or you can unmute yourself. But do put your questions in the chat. They'll be answered at the end. Now about Michele. She is the conservation director for the town of Lincoln, but her real passion is sharing her love of birds with everybody. Her interest in birding started as a child when she became fascinated by feathered friends coming to the family's bird feeder. These early observations developed into a career in conservation. Michele lives in Waltham and often sees herons and hawks flying over her Cedarwood neighborhood. Her hobbies include trail running, kayaking, cross-country skiing, traveling, and of course, bird watching. So I am delighted to invite Michele to pull up her presentation. And wow, look at everybody. Hi, wow, there's a lot of people here. Great, fabulous, great. Okay, well, Michele, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you, Sonia. Are you able to see my full screen? Awesome, excellent, thumbs up, and I see your face, so that's, and Roseanne, you are unmuted, and we're getting some background noise from Roseanne Iocano, so if you can yourself, that would be helpful. Excellent. So good evening, everyone. I'm so thrilled to see how many people have come tonight to listen to my talk. It's so gorgeous outside, so I know it can be tough to make these decisions, but my hope today is to really get you excited about birding. Maybe you're new, maybe you're intermediate, and hopefully you'll learn a few different tips and tricks to make it a more enjoyable bird watching experience this spring. So with that, in terms of what we're going to cover today, I'm going to whet our appetites by listening to some of my favorite Waltham birds and surrounding town birds. I'm going to give you some tips for identifying birds. There's some what I would consider essential tools in our birders toolbox. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about what you can do to help the birds, because they are kind of in trouble along with a lot of nature these days. And then lastly, I'll share some of my favorite bird resources that you can read, watch, or listen to. So with that, we're going to start with some of my favorite Waltham birds. Someone even posted this as their favorite bird, which is the northern cardinal. So like many birds, the male and female look very different. The males are often have more pretty colors, more bright colors to attract females. Females tend to be more camouflage because they're incubating eggs and raising young. And this is very typical of the northern cardinal setup as well. Their sound is a beautiful liquid whistle. I'm going to play that here. See if you remember the sound. Hopefully that sounds somewhat familiar to you all. Another very common Waltham bird is our American robin. Oftentimes people think of the robin as the harbinger of spring. When you see robins, like spring has sprung. In fact, robins will spend the entire year in Waltham, but it's when they sing their beautiful spring melody that reminds me that it's the spring season. And we often talk about putting little phrases to bird sounds to help us remember it. And some people use the cheerily, cheerio, cheerily to remember the robin sound. Just a beautiful, and they're very, very early morning song that sometimes they'll wake you up before you want to be woken up. Someone else mentioned as their favorite bird, the Carolina wren. This is has such a big, boisterous voice for a very small, couple-inch size bird. They have that beautiful white eye stripe, and they too stick around in the winter. And they actually, you'll hear their song sometimes in the winter, but certainly this time of year. And it sort of sounds like a tea kettle, tea kettle, tea kettle.
darling. I don't want you to go nowhere. A peach? A peach.
And Kathy Mulledy, I'm hearing your voice and your special sound, so maybe you can mute yourself. Thank you. So tea kettle, tea kettle, tea kettle. Beautiful sounds from that Carolina wren. You can still find these in Waltham, but not as common as some of the other birds I've shown. The pileated woodpecker is our largest woodpecker in Massachusetts. It sort of reminds me of our woody woodpecker when I was growing up. And they make these huge holes in trees. They have a very loud sound. Sounds like we're sort of in a jungle when I hear them. And then the last spotlight, if you're super lucky, you might see an owl in Waltham. We actually have great horned owls in Cedarwood neighborhood, but barred owls too can be found in Waltham. They have a lovely sound that says, "Who cooks for you? Who cooks for you all?" Love those sounds. So now we're going to kind of dive into some tips for beginners. If you're sort of a newbie birder, don't feel overwhelmed. I mean, the great thing about birding is you can just look out your window and see and hear birds any time of the year, especially this time of year. And you probably know more about birds than you think you do. So I always start with a simple suggestion, which is stop, look, and listen. Just take a moment, put down the computer, put down your book, put down your iPhone, and just kind of observe what's happening outside a nearby window or sit at the park bench. And oftentimes you can, if you see a bird, and even if you don't have binoculars, just looking at their silhouette will help you get a sense on what kind of family, what family of birds that particular species is part of. And so even looking at these silhouettes, you might recognize the great horned owl, has those ear tufts and kind of a big bird. The pileated woodpecker we saw in an earlier slide with that long beak and the tail that's pressing against the tree. American crows are quite large and they have a special sort of shape and size to them. Of course, some of our songbirds like the house sparrow and goldfinch and chickadees, they sort of all have a similar size, but once you get attuned to their specifics, even those silhouettes can be quite different. And I know some people mentioned about hummingbirds. They're just so tiny. I sometimes when I see one flitter by, I think like, was that a bee or was that a hummingbird? Because they're just so tiny. The other thing you want to do is kind of, if you're able to actually see color of the bird or it's close enough for using binoculars, is looking for what we call field marks. So most of our field guides will have they'll point out specific things to look at in each particular bird. Some birds will have an eye stripe, others will have kind of a decurved bill or a very long pointed bill. Some have wing bars, some have belly stripes. The color of the leg could be pretty unique to a particular bird. And so even if I don't have a bird book with me, if I see a bird I'm not familiar with, I try to make this mental note about the color of the head, the color of the tail, color of the breast. Those are things that are going to be unique to each bird. And so even just writing it down and taking notes, even if you don't have a field guide with you, can help you then later identify that bird. Also, looking at what the bird's doing can help you identify it. So obviously, when I go to a pond and I see a bunch of birds swimming in that pond, I'm instantly thinking like ducks or swans or geese. Certain birds are more prone to be eating berries in a bush, like catbirds and robins. This image here in the middle is from a comic, an artist called Rosemary Moscow. I absolutely love her work. Bird and Moon comics. And this is a great visual of 3 different species that you can find on trees. Our white-breasted nuthatch, many of you have probably seen before, and they will kind of circle going down, headed down a tree. The brown creeper, which is a less common but still found in Waltham bird, kind of creeps up a tree. And then this is, of course, a comic, but the yellow-bellied sapsucker kind of goes around a tree. And I guess if they were all found on the same tree, they might bang into each other, but likely not. But it really does help you sort of think about behavior and how that might help you identify the bird. And then also knowing where to look. So the more habitats that touch each other, the more likely you're going to find different species of birds. So we have here, if you look at a field or a pond, and you can see those edges, a lot of birds love those edges. And so I love going to like an open field or a pond edge, and you A, get better views, but B, there's a lot of edges where birds like to hang out. Birds, however, as the edges start to leaf out, as they're doing right now, it gets harder and harder to see those birds. This bottom picture here is a catbird. I actually have one who loves to visit my bird bath in my backyard. And usually they're very hard to find because they're sort of hiding in these shrubs. But I love the fact that just in my backyard, I have a lovely little catbird hanging out. And the other thing when you're starting to learn to bird is there's several birds that all look alike. And so it's easy to open a bird book and be like, oh my gosh, I have a tree sparrow. And if it's summertime, likely it is not a tree sparrow in Massachusetts. And so it's also very important to know that when you have a field guide, it shows you what's called a range map. So where is that bird supposed to be in that season? We do have chipping and tree sparrows in Waltham, but chipping sparrows are found here in the summer months. So if you look above the chipping sparrow, it shows in sort of this, I guess, orangey color where it's located in the summer breeding season. So the chipping sparrow is very common in New England in the summer, whereas in the winter, it goes to southern US and Mexico. Whereas the tree sparrow, it's found in New England in the winter months. And so 2 species that look fairly similar, just knowing what season it is will help you identify the actual individual of that bird. It doesn't mean you can't have a rarity show up, but generally I suggest people stick with what's supposed to be there first. My 6th tip for beginners is using your ears. So I think one of the things a lot of people enjoy about birds is hearing their bird song, hearing those bird sounds in the morning or on a walk. And there's 2 great things about hearing bird sound. First is it tells you where to look. So if I'm walking on a trail and I hear a bird singing to the right of me, I know to look to the right and sort of see it. Of course, with all the leaves on the trees, sometimes it's even hard to pinpoint it. So the middle picture is sort of the best you might get of a view of this is a rose-breasted grosbeak. It's very hard to ever get such a great image like the one on the right. They do come to your feeders though this time of year for a short time frame. But that rose-breasted grosbeak has a beautiful sound. And so even if you're unable to find the actual bird in the tree or in the shrub, if you learn their song, then you can actually identify that bird by that song alone, which can be quite exciting. And I'll go into that a little bit more in detail here. So I will say that learning birdsong is like learning a foreign language. It does take time, it does take practice, but it can be done. It's one of the things that I love. I sort of call it my superpower because after college, I worked doing a breeding bird survey in New Hampshire. And before I was hired, I had to learn 180 birds by song. And most of those have stuck with me over the years, and I'm so thrilled by that. I'm going to give you a little taste of some tips on how to learn bird songs. Some birds, like I mentioned, you can put a phrase to that bird. song, like our black-capped chickadee. They're also known as a namesayer because they sort of say chickadee-dee-dee as one of their sounds. The other sound they make is a springs here. I'll play these here. But not all birds will have sort of a phrase you can put to them, but they may make a sound that is similar to a sound you're familiar with. So example, this black and white warbler, which is in Waltham this week, it migrates through it. Most of them will not stay to breed, but I just saw one on Sunday. And the black and white warbler kind of sounds like a squeaky wheel. Let's see what you think. And the last one is a chipping sparrow, which will stick around to breed in Waltham this summer. It has a trill, but the trill is kind of too fast to count. Let's see what you think. And I hear them a lot on the Brandeis campus when I walk there. I actually do teach backyard birdsong identification classes through Community Ed. So I'm just doing a little shameless plug that through Arlington and Newton Community Ed, you can find my backyard birdsong Zoom classes coming up. Technically, it starts tomorrow night, but then I also have a couple later in May and even in early June, and these are on weekday nights. So you're welcome to check those out as well as a possible way of learning them. Okay. Oh, and the other thing that's great is YouTube has phenomenal videos of birds singing. So then you get to see the picture of the bird and hear it. This is one of my favorite birds, the eastern towhee, and it sort of sounds like it's saying, "Drink your tea." And I could just watch YouTube videos with birds like all day long in winter. So spring and summer, you want to be outside, but if you're bored some winter day, it's so great to check those out. Okay, so there really isn't too many things you need to have or buy in order to go bird watching, but there are a couple things that are super helpful. And I would say the most important thing to do is to acquire a pair of binoculars. A lot of people, when they come on my bird walks the first time, they'll be like, "Oh, I found this pair of binoculars in some shelf or some drawer, and I haven't used it in 20 years. And it's all dusty, and the dial doesn't really work." But they bring them out, and it really is important to have a functional pair of binoculars. So definitely try them out first, and you don't have to spend that much money. One of the ones I've suggested for people over the last few years is this Nikon Pro Staff 8x42s, and you can get them for under $150. And they just fit good in the hand. They're lightweight. They really, I think, have great quality to the glass. And I have a couple extra pairs. So when, if anyone's going on my May 21st bird walk and you don't have a pair, I have pairs that people can borrow. And it's just a wonderful thing to try to check out. And it's always best to try them out before purchasing them. So I always suggest people could go to the Audubon shop in Lincoln or Wild Birds Unlimited in Sudbury. Those are great places to try on a pair of binoculars before investing in them. You can spend a lot of money on binoculars, but you don't have to. The other good tool in your birder's toolbox is a bird book, and there's quite a variety of those. Some have photos of birds, others have sketches. Again, it really is a personal preference. If you are a new birder, I would suggest going with something like the Birds of Massachusetts, so that it only lists, the couple hundred birds you might see in Massachusetts. Or at least if you get one for Eastern North America, that will still somewhat limit it, but then you're talking hundreds and hundreds of birds. If you get something like, National Geographic Birds of North America, obviously that's going to have a suite of birds many that you'd never see in Eastern US. So you might want to just kind of think about starting with a Massachusetts bird book and then expanding. The other thing is that you often, of course, nowadays, you know, at some point, I'm probably not even going to recommend you get a bird book because everything is visible on your phone. There's so many different apps to download. The one that probably is the most popular right now is called Merlin. It's by Cornell Lab of Ornithology. And it's a free app, and you can use it to look up different birds as you're kind of bird watching. So if you see a northern cardinal, you can like click on northern cardinal and you can listen to their songs. The other thing that they've mastered, and this is just in the last 5 years, which is amazing, is you can actually hit a birdsong recorder. So you can hit record and it will actually start to listen to the sounds around you, and it'll pop up the different birds that supposedly Merlin is hearing. And people are starting to use that a lot. You have to be cautious, of course, it's not always right, but it's quite an amazing birding app. And then again, back to the bird songs, there are CDs. There's Cornell All About Birds website where you can click on a bird and listen to the different songs. And I just recommend checking out the All About Birds website, and at least for your common backyard birds, listening to the sounds so you kind of get sort of used to what their different songs sound like. And then once you've got your tools, your birding tools, you get your little skills, it's time to get outside. And I just want to mention briefly about being aware that we too have an impact on birds. So as you're birding, I always suggest that people stay on a trail so that they're not going to be flushing birds in the woods. If you're in a marsh or near the beach, you really don't want to be approaching, of course, any of our raptors or you know, wading birds, because we could scare them away. Excuse me. Back to we're talking about Merlin and recording bird sounds. You also want to be very careful about playing bird calls or songs, because what you're doing by playing a bird song outside is if there is, let's say you're playing a male cardinal song, if you play it, the male cardinals in that area are going to think that you are a competitor male, and they're going to come and maybe try to chase you away. So you want to be very cautious about that, because you don't want them to expend energy checking you out. They should be spending energy protecting their nest. So you just want to be careful about if you are using bird sounds outside, that what kind of impact you have. And a couple quick tips. Really, you can go bird watching any time of the year. This time of year, you're going to see more, but it can be very overwhelming. You know, it's very easy on a 2-hour walk in the morning to have 40 species of birds singing or coming out. Whereas in the wintertime, if you went, you might be lucky to have a handful of birds that you might see on a winter walk. So thinking about the time of year is important. The earlier you wake up, the better. You know, the birds, they say they have this dawn chorus, so they're most active in the morning hours. We're talking 4:45 a.m. come summer, 5 a.m. You know, the phoebes and the robins will start to wake me up in the morning. And it does start to quiet down around 9 or 10 in the morning. So the earlier you can get up, the better. You don't have to go on long hikes to go bird watching. You can easily just find a bench in a local park or your backyard or nearby conservation land. And really sitting or just standing for a few minutes, up to 10 minutes, you will hear different birds coming in. Whereas if you're walking with a friend on a conservation land, you're going to hear far less birds. So really just taking a moment to absorb nature makes a big difference. And we already talked about how pond edges and field edges are more likely to have more species of birds. So those are always good places to get outside and go look for them. And also, you know, I think even if you're an intermediate birder, it can be really frustrating to sort of hear a bird or see a bird and not know what it is. So I always encourage folks to join a bird walk. Like Sonia said, I'll be leading 2 walks for Waltham Land Trust. Mass Audubon, of course, has lots of different bird walks. And actually, over the next 3 weeks, I have about a half dozen bird walks I'm leading through different community education programs. So you're welcome to check out Arlington, Concord, Lincoln, Newton Community Ed. And I have a whole slew of bird walks that are coming up. And that just helps you sort of get some confidence in what you're hearing, to know that an expert can sort of explain what they're hearing and why. That just makes birding a little bit more enjoyable when you're a new birder. So switching topics a little bit, unfortunately, birds are in trouble. There's been 2 recent publications that have come out in the last 5 years. This one from, or I should say, research published in September of 2019 by the journal Science found that wild bird populations in the US and Canada have declined by almost 30% since 1970. And that's startling news. Me having grown up in the 70s, feel just so frustrated and saddened by the fact that our bird numbers are just dwindling dramatically. And many of us probably know a number of the causes, certainly habitat fragmentation, overdevelopment, increased storm events because of climate change, and a number of threats that we'll talk about really have impacted birds over the years. Birds are one of the most well-researched topics for species. There's just hundreds and thousands of documented bird reports, from Christmas bird counts to breeding bird surveys. So it's a very well-studied population. So as a result, scientists have been able to really hone in on population change on a number of our species. Interestingly, one of the few bird species, or I should say bird families, that is actually doing well are wetland birds, water birds. And that's likely because in the 1970s, when we started to protect our wetlands through both the Clean Water Act and, of course, local and federal wetland protection laws, along with actually duck stamps, hunters actually contribute quite a bit of money and funding to protect wetlands. So wetland birds are actually, I should say, at least the ducks and the geese, water birds are actually doing fairly well. Unfortunately, all of our other habitat-specific birds are not doing well. So that can be kind of depressing, but I always want to go through some really simple, what I think of fairly simple things that we all can do to help birds survive and to hopefully thrive. So we're going to start with reducing bird glass collisions. So shockingly, over 1 billion birds die after hitting windows in the US each year. And almost half of these actually hit home windows. So it's not just the big skyscrapers, it's even our backyard, our windows in our back of our house, etc. So what happens is the glass is reflecting the forest or the fields near your house, and it causes a bird to think that the reflection is just more of the natural world. So addressing the collisions at home can make a huge difference. And oftentimes it's not like every window in your house, it might just be 1 or 2. So if you have heard or found birds hitting a particular window, there's really simple things you can do to try to remove that reflection, either putting decals or stickers to try to prevent those bird strikes on those windows. The other thing we talk about is turning lights off. So the majority of migrating birds fly at night, and they navigate with the night sky. However, as they pass over cities, they can become disoriented by bright artificial lights and sky glow, often causing them to collide with buildings or windows. And so while lights can throw birds off their migration path, bird fatalities are more directly caused by the amount of energy the birds waste flying around and calling out in confusion. And this exhaustion can then leave them vulnerable to other urban threats. So Audubon Society has actually been trying to do different programs in different cities to try to encourage mayors and town officials to really promote turning lights off at night. In particular, it's from March 1 to June 1st. So we're still in the midst of spring migration is most important. And then again, fall migration, which is mid-August through end of October. And turning off window lights and external lighting from 11 p.m. to 5 a.m. during those migration periods can certainly help a lot of birds and really save energy and money. So if you happen to work for a company, that's another great way to sort of make some progress by talking to your employer or your landlord of a bigger building to find out if they can turn their lights off at night. Third tip is improving our backyard bird habitat. So first talking about things that we can add that are not natural, but still helpful to birds. My favorite is actually a bird bath. I just put out a bird bath when we moved to Waltham 3 years ago. And no joke, in like 20 minutes, we had a cardinal and a gray capper just come right to the bird bath. And you have to change it out every couple of days so it doesn't breed mosquitoes, but it's just right by my backyard, my back doorstep. So I easily just dump it out and refill it every day. And I love seeing the birds come to the bird bath. Water is a pretty tough source for people, for birds to find in the summer months. So it's a great thing to add. A lot of people enjoy putting out bird food as well to attract different birds. Different birds like different food. So it kind of depends on what you want to see. Of course, in Waltham, we have lots of house sparrows. I don't personally put out a bird feeder because I think I would likely have mostly house sparrows, which is a non-native bird, come. So I like the bird bath, and then we'll talk about native plants, which is really good. The other thing you can do is put up bird houses. I do have a house wren nest box, I should say, that I put up a couple of years ago during the summer months. And for the last 2 years, we've had house wrens. This year, I was not chosen. My house was not chosen as a house wren for a house wren to use. We still have it up, but I can hear him, and I think he's just using a neighbor's birdhouse instead. I am a huge fan of increasing pollinator habitat and improving your bird habitat in your own backyard. We have a tiny yard, but still, I actually leave the leaves around the entire yard, except for just a little part of my lawn and my driveway, of course, that we leaf blow or rake. But everything else, I leave the leaves. And it is amazing to see the birds just kind of push the leaves up in the wintertime, looking for bugs and insects throughout the entire year. When my flowers went to seed last fall, I left all of the stems, and I will see birds like these goldfinch just kind of hanging out in the seed heads all winter, feeding off of them. So I really, really encourage folks to consider planting native plants, leaving the leaves, allowing reducing lawn size, allowing things to flower more. It's amazing the birds that I've seen in my yard, and a couple of my neighbors that have mostly lawn. I just don't see as many birds in their yard. So I think it makes a huge difference. Another tip or something you can help do is contact your legislatures to support the House and Senate bill to help control the amount of rodenticide poisoning happening in Massachusetts. So I don't know how many of you have heard about this. I know Waltham Land Trust is a big proponent of reducing or eliminating rat poison. And why do we want to eliminate rat poison? Rodenticide poison is because what happens is the rats and mice are eating this toxic chemical, and then the raptors, the hawks and owls, are then eating the poisoned mice and rats, and they are succumbing to toxic levels that kill them. And over 90% of the hawks and owls entering rehab over the last couple of years have had like fatal or near fatal levels of rodenticide poisoning. Rodenticide poisoning being used now is mostly, it's an anticoagulant. What happens is basically it causes internal bleeding, hemorrhaging, that kills these birds. It's become a huge issue in Massachusetts. And so Waltham Land Trust has done a great job trying to educate folks to really find out about if you see, rat traps or the rat boxes in Waltham, find out what's in them, start inquiring to find out. I mean, there are some more environmentally friendly ways to reduce, to kill or trap rats, but it's the second generation anticoagulant escar that ends up being so toxic for hawks and owls. I will say that Tom Stanley, who is our rep in Waltham, is a supporter of these bills to try to control the amount of pesticide being used for rat traps. So that's good to know. But if I know some of you are not from Waltham, absolutely call your state reps, find out if they're in support of the act relative to pesticides. And it's really going to take a force of people to make this happen. It's been sort of stuck in the House and Senate for several years now, and we really need to, call to action to stop this poisoning. Another sensitive topic, of course, is the reality that cats and dogs kill lots of birds every year. This image I know is startling. It shows 232 animals which were brought into an animal hospital in California after domestic cat attacks, and they did not survive. And I know a lot of us have fur babies at home, and we love our four-legged friends, but make no mistake about it, cats that roam outdoors kill approximately 2.4 billion birds every year in the US alone, making cat predation by far the largest source of direct human-caused mortality to birds. A lot of the predation occurs where housing area borders open space, so allows cats easy access into wild areas. I will in Cedarwood, where I live, we have a number of well-loved cats that have homes, have families, but they're allowed to roam outside during the day. And I had 2 cats in my front yard this morning. So what can you do? The best thing to do, of course, is keep your cat indoors. It's safer for the cat too. A number of cats disappeared in Cedarwood last year. There's coyotes, there's foxes. So keeping cats indoors is really important. And dogs, dog lovers are not off the hook either. Keeping dogs on leash is best. Always picking up after your dog is important. And respecting the trail rules. I think a lot of towns like Waltham and certain parts of Weston and Lincoln do require that dogs be leashed. And that's just helping keep dogs on trails rather than running through the woods. Some birds are ground nesting birds. And so dogs can do quite a bit of impact when they're free roaming the woods. Also, reducing your carbon footprint is important. What I love living in Waltham, it's like I can walk or bike to almost any grocery store, the pharmacy. I can do so many of my errands just by walking or being on bike. So I love trying to combine sort of exercise and a lot of the sort of chores I need to do. In addition to that, I'm a huge coffee drinker, and it's really important to buy shade-grown coffee because that's plantations that actually are bird-friendly. My favorite is Dean's Beans, Migration Celebration. But certainly buying local, consuming less, doing a home energy audit, even trying to reduce the energy needs is going to help combat climate change, which is obviously impacting bird migration, bird habitat, etc. And lastly, supporting bird conservation. So like Sonia said, it really is important for us to put our money where our sort of inspiration is. And so, every time Waltham Land Trust helps to protect or acquire open space or helps the town protect or acquire open space, they're protecting bird habitat. So look at sort of funding locally, Waltham Land Trust, the Conservation Commission, Community Preservation Act, supporting local land protection is hugely important. Obviously, national levels like Cornell Lab of Ornithology, National Audubon Society, or Mass Audubon Society are all great organizations that protect birds and bird habitat. And this is my last slide. Hopefully, tonight you've gotten inspired to sort of make a few changes in your backyard, maybe learn a little bit more. One of my favorite podcasts is Bring Birds Back, especially the first 2 seasons. Those are my favorite. It came out during the pandemic, so 2020, 2021. Tanisha Hamilton was the awesome host who would bring in experts to talk about these really interesting topics and would always bring it back to sort of what we can do to help birds. So consider listening to Bring Birds Back. There's also lots of course videos and books to look into. Grow Native, which was a Waltham based nonprofit. I think it just moved to Lexington. Still love Grow Native. Really huge at native plants, encouraging people to purchase. They have a whole bunch of different resources on their website. They're actually having a plant sale in a couple weeks. So consider buying native plants. And the messenger is actually a video I saw on Canopy. So just from the local library, you can download an app called the Canopy, and you could stream this video right into your TV. And it was a visually thrilling ode to the beauty and importance of our imperiled songbirds. So it kind of describes what it will mean to all of us on Earth if we lose them. The movie does not sugarcoat the dire situation birds are currently facing, but I did find it riveting and terrifying. And I hope you'll consider watching that. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I will just say lastly, again, you're welcome to contact me if you're interested in any upcoming bird classes that I'm teaching. I did have my email address up there and I can throw it in the chat again if anyone has any, wants to know more about my classes. But for now, I'm going to turn it back over to Sonia and Diana, and I'm hoping some people have some questions and we have time for some questions.
We definitely have time for questions. And there was one that was put in the chat a while ago, and others, put your questions into the chat if you got them, or you could probably just raise your hand too, and we can track you down. But the one that's in the chat is, how does one tell, or can one tell, the difference between a male and female cardinal?
Oh, great
I
question.
mean, Robin, I'm sorry, not cardinal. That's pretty easy, the cardinal, it's the robin.
That is a great question. Yeah, some birds you really can't. So birds like Canada geese and robins, gray catbirds, males and females actually look really similar. So there are times, I mean, there's very, very subtle differences. But with the robins, personally, I really can't tell either. So sometimes you just don't know.
Is it sometimes like the female is maybe bigger, like with the bald eagle? Is that not really the case with the robin?
Yeah, robins, I don't think there's that much of a difference. To your point, so there's some birds like, especially the raptors, so eagles, red-tailed hawks, the owls, the female is actually larger than the male. And that's because she's often, raising the young or, incubating the babies. And so they're just a larger sex, but not such with the robins. I think they're generally the same size. Canada geese, interesting, they look similar. The male Canada geese have a longer neck than the females, but unless you have the pair standing next to each other, it's really hard to tell. So some of them it's just hard to tell.
Yeah. Other questions? I mean, if you don't want to type into the chat, I think we could, or can you, oh, I see DM would like to share a question.
I have a question about when I'm out walking, I can hear the birds, but I can't see them in the trees. Is there a special way of trying to spot a bird in the tree?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's a sound you can make that sometimes birds find curious and they might come out to see you. It's called pishing. And it's like making a pishing sound. So it's like, psh, psh. And making that sound, it's birds sometimes find it curious. So they might, like, there's been times I've been walking in the woods and I'll hear a bird sort of, and I'll pish, psh, and all of a sudden like 4 or 5 birds will kind of come into the area and you're like, oh wow, that's kind of cool. I will also caution you that sometimes when you pish, the bird flies away. So there's always that chance. So you could try pitching. The first thing I would do though is just to stand still for a few minutes and see if you can notice it moving around. So the best thing is going to be just observe, standing still, observing, seeing if it will move around for you. And if not, after a few minutes, I would try pitching and see if maybe it comes out of the tree or the bush. And the reality is there's just sometimes you just can't see the bird because there's too many leaves. And that's where, again, birdsong identification really still helps you with identifying the bird. And again, even if you don't know the song itself, if you have Merlin on your app and you can hit the bird recorder, it'll hear whatever is singing, it'll tell you what bird it is. So it's not as fun as seeing the bird itself, but those are different tools you'll have available to you.
Thank you.
Oops, sorry. I was just going to read a question from April Oswald, who I have to share. Is my niece watching from Connecticut? April says, we have a robin who built a nest in our back tree. When do robin eggs hatch? And do robins leave the nest after the eggs hatch, or will they stay there?
Great question. Yeah, so a lot of songbirds, the incubation period from when the eggs are laid to when the eggs hatch is under 2 weeks. It's usually between 11 and 14 days. And then by the time the eggs hatch to when the babies fledge is less than 2 weeks again. So the whole time period from when the egg is laid to when the baby robin flies the nest is under 30 days. Once they leave the nest, once any bird leaves a nest, the baby birds, they tend not to come back. It was kind of funny when we were watching the house wrens in my backyard last year, feeding on it. I could see the parents feeding them for a couple weeks from the birdhouse. And it was really exciting. And then the one day they fledged, I just assumed they'd hang out in our yard for a little while and get to enjoy them. They totally disappeared, like the whole family gone. And I felt a little abandoned. Like it was like we watched this whole experience for for almost a month, and then they disappeared. Now I will say after 2 weeks, the parents came back and then mated and laid another clutch and raised another clutch of eggs, babies. So that was kind of cool. So they can come back. They might reuse the nest the same season. So it's good to keep the nest up. They might come back. Robins, I will say, the babies I have here, they tend to stay around. Like I'll see mom trying to feed the baby, and the young, they're like teenagers, right? Even though they look as big as mom or dad, they will just beg and beg and beg for food. And it's kind of, it was hysterical. Last year I saw this mom. I just felt for the mom. She just looked exhausted. I'm being totally anthropomorphic here, but she's like trying to find food for herself. And this young, it was a baby, but it was the same size as the mom, the fledgling, is just like pecking at her and wanting to be fed. And the first day or two she would. And then literally one day she was like, no holds bar, I'm done with you. And she literally, like, she's looking for food, and the young one's next to her. She just almost like attacked it. She was like, just get off of me. And she caught a worm and flew away. And the baby's like, wait, what do I do now? And it just has to learn. Like, think about how hard it must be for all these baby birds to learn how to feed themselves. So it's a huge new chapter in their lives. And of course, that's why birds have so many babies. Only a very small percentage of birds actually survive to adulthood. So it's just kind of one of these natural selection things that happen. So, but usually, within a month, eggs will hatch and babies will fledge.
I kind of have a follow-up question on that. I guess I used to think that all birds had nests to sleep in all the time. But no, they really only have nests when they're laying eggs and raising the babies. So then they just like sleep balancing on a branch, or?
Yeah, exactly. The wintertime, sometimes chickadees or titmice will find, they'll even sometimes they'll not nest, find shelter like in an old paper wasp nest, or even if you have a birdhouse up, sometimes they'll find some shelter there, but they really only have the nest for the raising of the young phase.
I guess if every bird had a nest, there'd be bird nests everywhere.
Right. I think we'll blame Charlie Brown, right? Because is it Charlie Brown? And I should totally know the name of the bird on Charlie Brown, but
Woodstock
has a nest, right? Like Woodstock lives in a nest all year. It's not just for breeding. So we'll blame Charlie Brown on making that vision in our heads.
Totally. Kathy asks, we found a robin egg on the ground in our garden. There is no nest or trees around. Any ideas how it got there? And what should we do if we find one below a nest?
Okay, so yeah, every once in a while I have found an egg where I have not identified a nest nearby. I will say that blue jays and grackles and other birds actually prey on eggs. Like they will go to other birds' nests and actually eat eggs. It's possible that they could have grabbed an egg and flown out and maybe it dropped. Or even actually squirrels and chipmunks, unfortunately, are big egg eaters too. I mean, normally you think they would just eat it. Why would they drop it? But they could have been startled by a cat or like another predator and it dropped it. Generally speaking, if you find an egg on the ground, the likelihood of it hatching is so slim to none. So I tend just to leave it and let nature take its course. Now, if we're talking baby birds, sometimes baby birds will fall out of nests. And if it is a baby bird, and if you see the nest, you can pick up a baby bird and try to put it back into a nest. There is that period of time when birds are fledging where they look like baby birds, but they're jumping out on their own behalf and they're just going to jump out again. It's not the end of the world. You can try. Interestingly, it's kind of an old wives' tales that you shouldn't touch baby birds because you're scent. The parents won't come back because of the scent. That's another sort of myth. Most birds don't have a sense of smell. So now your smell of your hand on a baby bird could attract a predator like a chipmunk or a squirrel or a cat could smell you maybe, but it's better to try to, if it's a real baby bird, to try to get it back into the nest. Again, a lot of birds, it takes several days for it to learn how to fly even after it jumps out of the nest. And that's its most vulnerable time. And that's where I feel for like when there's a lot of cats around and you end up being fearful that, maybe if will the cat find this baby bird and like, how do you make sure it's protected? But generally speaking, even if it's a young one on the ground, the parents will still be feeding it. So, but with eggs, they tend not to be viable once they're not incubated after, several minutes.
Thanks. Others, questions? You can raise your hand or click the reaction, raise your hand button if you'd like to do that, or you can type it into chat. I'm glad to hear about that moving baby bird thing. My partner works at a country club and there's a nest of mourning doves, which he has been watching like a hawk. And there's a mom and a dad mourning dove and there are two babies. And yesterday, one of the babies was on the ground. And after much discussion, they decided they would quickly pick it up and put it back in the nest. And everything was fine the next day. And yep, the mom didn't disown it and all that jazz. So that was a success story. And I'm glad to hear that that's kind of an old wives' tale because I thought it was the case too. Maybe that's more with deer or with animals. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think certainly with mammals, they definitely can smell much more. So I think you do have to be very cautious about that. Yeah. But birds, not so much. One of the few birds that has a really good sense of smell is a vulture. So turkey vultures, of course, they're trying to smell dead, really smelly things, right? That's where they find their food. So they have a great sense of smell. But other than turkey vultures, most birds don't. And in fact, some people have challenges like, how do I keep squirrels from eating my bird seed? And so places like Wild Birds Unlimited, they'll actually mix cayenne pepper and different types of, spicy spices into the bird seed. And it doesn't affect the birds, but it will affect the squirrels and chipmunks. So it does help to deter squirrels from eating your bird seed.
Wow, that's fascinating. Huh. Other questions, thoughts, comments? I will say that Michele mentioned the Land Trust's effort to reduce the use of and need for rodenticides. Our group, Save Waltham Wildlife, is looking for volunteers to join us in our advocacy. We are urging city councilors to ask for, demand that all residents get those big wheeled trash cans with the lid that stays attached, and when they're square, they don't tend to roll like tumbleweed in the wind. So we really feel like every Waltham resident deserves to have one of those. Every neighboring town pretty much provides them to their residents. Why not Waltham? So we're advocating for that, as well as the big belly self-containing trash cans to be installed along Moody Street and Main Street, because I see all the time those barrels rolling down Main Street and they're just filthy and gross. And these big belly things are everywhere, like across the world. You know, you see them in Europe and everywhere. So we feel like that can be happening in Waltham. We have been told that the city is not using escars. I'm pretty sure they're not, what that means is that they're not putting down any new traps with escars. Instead, they're having traps that keep the rat and have to be manually checked and cleared frequently. There was discussion of them paying to have contrapest, which is the birth control aspect added to the traps, but I don't think that's happened. So I think there are a lot of current existing traps that still have the escars in them. So say Waltham Wildlife is looking for help and doing a rat box survey where we can track down exactly what's available.
And you're motivating me, Sonia, again, just in Cedarwood alone over the last month, almost like every block, every like street block in Cedarwood, lower Cedarwood, I'm seeing these the black boxes. And none of them, there's supposed to be a label on them to say like what's in them, and none of them are checked off. So
Yeah,
it's complete mystery what's in these, and these have just been put out in the last month or two. So I'm going to reach out to my city council and just find out. And certainly anyone who's in Waltham, or if you're in a different city or town and you see them, like absolutely ask away. Like you should know what your town or your business is putting in those. That should be something that they should share with you. And it really takes asking those questions to really bring it front and center to people's minds. Not every black box has poison in it. You know, there's sometimes that there's snap traps inside, which is fine. You know, we understand it's a problem, but there's more environmentally sensitive ways to be handling the rat and mouse problem.
just one last thing before to another question, and that is that it's not only the raptors who are dying or getting hurt from eating rats, it's cats and dogs. Our pets, I know 3 people whose dogs have had to go to the vet a couple times because of this, so big issue. All right, Mark C wonders, how can we keep neighborhood cats away?
So hard, you know, like I said, I had 2 cats in my front yard today. You know, the thing is, you know, depending on if you know the neighbor and depending on your relationship, you can try to have a conversation. I will say it does seem to be one of these issues that people are just, you know, they feel their cat needs to be outside, or you know what have you. It's very difficult to sort of change people's minds on it in their current cat. And I'll say I had a cat for 17 years that was a slight indoor outdoor cat. And what we did when we moved to Waltham is I fenced off the backyard. She was like 17 years old and she stayed here, but she loved to be outside, and I got that. I totally get it. The current cats I actually foster now. I don't have a cat, but it's so great to just be able to open the door and have a cat fearful of the door, like not wanting to go outside is such an easier way to live with a pet. So moving forward, I would never encourage a cat to go outside, because once they sense it, it is kind of curious for them. There's so much they can see from their windows though, and that's the best thing to do. So what do? You know, this sounds stupid, but I just scare them away from my yard. Like I don't want my yard to be a happy place for cats. So when I see them, I'll hiss and I'll yell at them. I have a squirt gun, and I'll sometimes do that. And I try to make sure that they know that my yard is not a place that they should be. That's really the only thing I can kind of think of doing. You know, talking to your neighbor, just yelling and making it not a happy place for them is the best you can kind of do. If you do have neighborhood cats, I would not put bird feeders out, because then they'll get kind of used to a certain area. Those are kind of the only tips I really know of.
Those are good ones. Those are good ones. Others, we got maybe a minute or so left. Mark says thank you. Others in the chat have said thank you. This was a great talk, and we love Michele. We want to hear more. So Michele will be leading the bird walk that's already full next week, but then there'll be one in June. And then many of you might know Emily Sipek, who is Waltham Land Trust self-proclaimed bird nerd. She leads our bird walks in the wintertime and throughout the year. And actually, she'll be doing another one in July. So we will be having more bird walks in the future. So just keep in tuned with us. And people say thank you, Michelle.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I've had fun. Again, I'm sort of a new Waltham resident, so I'm excited to be part of helping Waltham Land Trust, promote bird and bird protection and land protecting bird habitat. So I look forward to teaching more classes. I left my email address in the chat, so you're welcome to email me directly. And just enjoy it. Just go outside, sit, listen to the birds. Listening to bird sound has been proven to help our mental health. So we can all use a little mental health boost these days. So just, this next time you have a free morning, take your coffee, take your stuffed owl, and just kind of have a quiet moment and just listen and enjoy the birds. I love that stuffed owl. So you gotta tell me about
It's
that.
actually, it's a piggy bank. So it's an owlie bank. So this is Hootie the donation owl. He's my little mascot and he comes with me everywhere. I have one that lives here in the house with me. I have one in the office. And if you come to our events, you'll see him. So we seek donations through Hootie. And then here's my little from Mass Audubon.
Totally cool. And does it have like a bird sound too? Is it usually, or is it just
Yeah,
stuff?
yeah.
Okay.
I just squeezed it. You hear it? It's doing the Phoebe, Phoebe, but you were saying it sounds more like sweet tea. I don't know. It sounds like different things to me.
Yeah, I said Springs here because I don't want to say Phoebe because there's a Phoebe and then people confuse the real Phoebe with a fake Phoebe. So, but it does say Phoebe too. You're right.
Awesome. So we did record this. Give us a little bit of time and I will put it on our website. I will also email it to everyone who registered and I'll include Michelle's contact information. So you can reach out to her if you'd like. And I'll do one last look at the chat and Lois says she was outside watching the swans, listening to the birds and almost missed the presentation. Awesome. All right. Well, with that, I think we're going to say goodbye, everyone. Thank you for tuning in and thank you to Michelle.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great night. Happy birding.
Thank you.
Good to see you, Ava.